our speaker today. Dr. Carla Meskill is currently a professor in the Department of Educational Theory and Practice, State University of New York, Albany, United States of America. Dr. Meskill is one of the leading scholars in online education. She has established and directed technology research centers at major universities, served as a research and design consultant, and shared her work around the world. Her publications include numerous books and research articles on digital screen mediation in classrooms, online instructions, and educator professional development. So please warmly welcome our speaker today, Dr. Carla Meskill, and I hope that you enjoy her session. So please give her a warm welcome. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much, and I apologize for the technical difficulty that I'm not being able to have the video feed, but I'm happy to be here, and welcome. And I'm greeting you from the Green Mountains of Vermont. That's where we're enjoying a very nice, cool summer evening up in the mountains. Okay, so I'm talking to you from the Green Mountains of Vermont. Vermont is, for those of you who don't know, is one of the 50 states of the United States. It's very small, it's mountainous, it's north of New York City, if that helps, and it's west of Boston. And you may know us because we are very famous for covered bridges that date way back in colonial history. And we're famous for our maple syrup and our cheese. And you can see we even have a cheese trail that you can follow in Vermont next time you come here. Right now, we're very proud of Vermont because we have the lowest record of COVID virus and the highest level of safety compliance in the United States. So we're very proud of that at the moment. And again, I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you for inviting me to talk to you about my very favorite topic. Whoops, there we go. Embracing online language teaching, which I have been, as the MC said, writing and thinking about and researching for many, many years. Clearly, this topic has taken on a very important urgency at the moment with the recent pandemic and with language teachers from all over the world experiencing a forced migration to online venues where they're being expected to teach with often very little support and very little foundations. My hope is that you're in the process of moving from, that everyone is in the process of moving from this emergency remote learning mode, this absolutely we have to do it mode, to a more carefully calculated distance education mode, something we've been doing for almost 30 years, teaching particularly and specifically online and designing education for that medium. So that's my hope, is that we're in the process of moving away from the emergency mentality to a more thoughtful careful design mode of what we do online. And as we've all become very, very aware in the last months, there's a huge difference between these two ways of thinking about teaching and learning. Online language teachers have been practicing for decades and have much to teach us about effective practices. And as you might expect, I'll be talking about just that kind of online teaching, the kind of online teaching that's carefully calculated, carefully designed, based on empirical research, observation, experience, the kind of instruction that uses proven design standards that are informed by second language research and the like. So my aim is to move us all in this direction away from emergency remote education. I don't even know if we're still in this state of emergency anymore, towards a more thoughtful design for online learning state. Something that I've said that before that I've been practicing and trying to perfect for decades now. The goal is for both educators and students to embrace learning English online. All of you have learned other languages, who have learned other languages, know about the great pleasure we experience when we use language well and effectively, when we comprehend it, when we communicate with it in satisfying ways. In fact, learning and using another language brings great pleasure. I'd like to make the point here that learning that language and getting to the point where you can derive such pleasures does not have to be a painful process, especially when that language learning happens online. In fact, I'm going to make the claim that it would be highly ironic if online language learning were anything but fun and enjoyable. Not only is it enjoyable, the affordances of online mediums allow for language-focused learning and interaction that are quite unique. Pre-internet images of language learners stuck with their big puffy headphones and completely isolated from others is a common one. I know this is hard to believe, but when I learned Spanish, my sole model, the only model I had for comprehensible input, was a Spanish textbook and my native English speaker rather, teacher. That's hardly the kind of rich, immersive experience students enjoy today with the internet. Indeed, it wasn't until 20-some years later that I could watch programming in the target language in Spanish. That's just how monolingual and monocultural the pre-internet world was. Back in the day, we didn't know that to learn a language well, we needed to have authentic target language models, samples, input, preferably those that can be with which we could actively participate. Language educators were to guide their learners to notice and make salient target syntactical, lexical, and phonological features illuminated. But then along came the digital. Language learners and their teachers have now at their fingertips samples of authentic communication. Not only that, there are untold opportunities to participate and thereby practice and learn that language. Students can browse online shopping malls in Barcelona, talk to native speakers in chat groups, become native Spanish speaker-like fans in fan groups, and the possibilities for ending authentic language are endless. Back in 1993, before any of you were born, I assigned my TESOL graduate students to journal with adult ESL learners using something called news groups, a very early primitive form of social media. They were encouraged to use this as an opportunity for informal language-focused conversation and build learners' communicative skills. The first graduate student who did this reported doing the following. The ESL student wrote to her, this is asynchronous, by the way, "I always think, write you." The graduate student took the initiative to write back using the correct form. "I look forward to writing to you too," giving her the correct model in a seamless, implicit, and authentic communicative format. The ESL student says, "My time in work hard, no time," and the graduate student writes back, "I'm so sorry you don't have time to study." Thus again, giving them the correct form, the correct model, and using the features of multimodal online technology to highlight and cause students' attention to be drawn to the language that's being targeted. So look what these graduate students did back in 1997. This was pretty phenomenal. They took the very simple asynchronous way of communicating with text and turned it into the perfect language learning machine. It was a far cry from the monotonous, awful things coming through those puffy headphones. We now had a way to draw students' attention to the forms and functions and language that we were targeting, and it was in an authentic, interesting, and engaging format. Now, earlier in that decade, this is still back in the 1990s, remember, a long time ago, there was a blast of research in second language acquisition on something called noticing. When learners noticed language, when they learned it, noticed forms, functions, particular phonological features, when they noticed morphological endings, that was considered prime learning. So teachers used all sorts of tricks, usually their voice, to get students to, understand the language through this process called noticing. And they did this through all sorts of authentic conversations. So what teachers now are orchestrating is they're orchestrating authentic language, authentic, contextualized, meaningful, archivable, manipulable target language conversation. I'll say that again. Authentic, contextualized, meaningful, archivable, manipulable, target language conversation with ample teachable moments in the technology to provoke and extend noticing. This is what online language teaching is particularly wonderful for, and we'll see many examples of that tonight. We'll be looking at what this fundamental concept does now for us, what it gives us. Some 25 years later, it's still a real prime way to learn another language online. Which leads us to the idea of games. Remember earlier I mentioned fun and pleasure? Well, back in the 90s also, when I discovered playing rudimentary games like Zork, you can explore spaces, collect items, all with text. This was a very long time ago. While I was immersed in navigating Zork's imaginary spaces and making decisions of what would lead to my desired outcomes, I figured I've never got to think like this before. Then I watched my friends' children playing these games and hearing them make the most articulate propositional statements. If we do this, then this may happen. Barring that, then we may have to do this. The kind of language that all teachers, it makes their heart sing. Logical, thoughtful, articulate, and for language learners, certainly very advanced syntactically. But I digress. Let's go back to teaching English online. But first we need to acknowledge our contemporary digital lives and the digital lives of our students. What is it now students are bringing to a digital world, from the digital world to a digital world of learning? They have multiple social media skills that we can build on as instructors. They are very good, we all are now actually very good at multitasking, navigating, bookmarking what it is we're looking at, updating what we're interacting with and our ideas about it, self-modulating, tracking our progress, conjecturing and explaining. We're very, very talented when it comes to representing things, something we can ask our students to do and they can do with great ease. With self-representations, how we represent ourselves in multimodal contexts has become very, very commonplace online and can be exploited in English teaching very nicely. Our students and ourselves are becoming much more proficient in interpretation and judgment. All this material that we have, we're constantly making judgments and interpreting. And we're also getting very good at prioritizing, organizing, and archiving all the information that we interact with in our digital lives. We're also getting very good at reading others' representations of their selves. finally, and that's the last one, right. Here's the full list. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg of the multiple talents that we all have now that we are digitally literate and digitally proficient. These are aspects of our students that we can take great advantage of in online teaching to engage them in the skills they are already developing quite nicely. And we can make use of those skills to make them better language learners. Those digital literacy skills are unquestionably positive. They're life skills, and if we value and make use of them in our teaching, they can become academically additive and linguistically additive. Think how relevant they are, all of these facets of our daily life, how we work, how we earn, how we interact with one another. Even architects are rethinking the spaces we coexist in based on our digital screen practices. So look, there's no question that during COVID, these are certainly going to radically change how we live. Embracing the opportunity for positive development and pro-human student-centered change is a wonderful thing, especially when it comes to language teaching. So how do you start to fully embrace online language teaching? Students have these extraordinary digital literacy skills, and we have the tools to build instruction that builds and makes use of these skills. Really, we'd be crazy not to make use of them. Before COVID, we witnessed the power of digital screen mediation in live classrooms when learners co-view and co-manipulate and converse together. It's very academically powerful. That is how language gets mastered. Also, pre-COVID, hundreds and thousands of teachers across the globe taught online by design and accomplished this quite well and quite beautifully. Indeed, I myself have been teaching online since 1997, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So we've got the tools that can be used well and to great effect. We embrace these tools for what they're good for, and we use our virtual presence sparingly and for what it's good for. Modeling, guiding, coaching, orchestrating, and the like. Instructional strategies we'll examine in more detail in a bit. But first, why online? Again, because it's a pleasurable place to be. That's why we spend all the time we do here. We spend zillions of hours swiping through text, images, audio for the sheer purpose of putting ourselves into a pleasant flow-like state. Image after image, meme after meme, soundbite after soundbite, binge watch after binge watch, selfie after selfie. We are wooed into a state of blissful relaxation. Now tell me why the same social medias and the same kinds of material and activity can't be used to teach English. In this is the case I'd like to make here, that with careful consideration, planning, and orchestration, online teaching and learning can be as pleasurable, if not more pleasurable and profound and lasting than our old ways of doing instruction. So the first thing we're going to look at are what are some of the things that online teaching provides for us? What are some of its affordances? There's convenience, obviously. Your lives have changed, I hope for the better, because you are now have the convenience of online instruction and online teaching. And certainly the connectivity that you have with others, the social connectivity. Well-designed courses make sure that everyone in the course is fully a member and fully engaged with every kind of activity that you design. Another feature of online mediums is that you have authentic membership and authentic audiences, so that native speakers are out there and willing and able and very interested in talking to your students about all sorts of things. Rather than contrived textbook kinds of language, you have the entire world at your fingertips to use. Authentic audiences and authentic members in your learning community. Native speaker. There's also the possibility of tailoring. You can tailor these audiences to make optimal use and create optimal opportunities for your students to have productive language use. So that students, for example, that are researching and presenting on classic cars, they need an audience that is equally impassioned about the topic. Very easy to find, and they'll be happy to participate. Oops. Online teaching is multimodal. Multimodal scaffolds, as I'll demonstrate in a minute, is a way we educators have at our fingertips to use visual, oral, imaginative support to scaffold and improve student learning. We have these visual tricks and strategies that can help improve student comprehension and production and learning. We have time, obviously, time to review, time to focus, time to compose, time and opportunity to strategize and reflect. And this is on the part of both students and teachers. Whereas teachers in live classrooms have this ethereal time, the language is spoken and it's gone. They have on-the-fly decisions that they have to make very quickly and continually. Online, you have the time to step back and replan and retool and tailor to meet your students' needs. Students and teachers all have time to compose as well. Not only that, they have all these resources at their hands to compose. They have dictionaries, native speaker consultants, not to mention the tools and all the opportunities they have to edit and edit and edit, a central critical skills. So very, very meaningful and productive as for a language learner. They also have time to strategize and reflect. For students, time and opportunity to demonstrate authentic language use and language learning, both synchronously and asynchronously, is a real bonus. For both teachers and students, time to witness and track learning is also a big plus. We can actually see the learning. It's recorded, it's archived, it's manipulable, it's trackable. It's a wonderful asset. And then finally, again, all of these affordances spell enjoyment. If you take them and you take them seriously and work hard to make your students' digital literacy skills go to work for you in this mode, you're going to have a fantastic online learning experience for your students. Okay. So again, the online affordances that we just looked at, we have convenience. You all know about that. You're experiencing it. We have social connectivity, the membership of being part of an online community. We have authentic audiences, native speakers out there who will participate with you. We have tailored audiences. We have multimodal scaffolds, visual, oral, animations, TikToks, every kind of scaffold imaginable to help your students learn, focus, and review, both teachers and students. We have time to compose and the resources to do so. We have the time and the opportunity to strategize and reflect. And for students, we have the time and opportunity to demonstrate authentic language acquisition. You know, one curious outcome from our forced migration to online learning, this emergency migration, one unexpected and kind of sad outcome is something called Zoom fatigue. This is that exhaustion that many are experiencing as a result of this constant synchronous video interactions like we're doing now. This exhaustion stems from our basic human need for synchrony. When we communicate with other people, we literally get in sync with our conversational partners. It's a physiological, it's a psychological, it's a biological reaction that we have, and it's a deep and important aspect of human communication. It's what it feels like when we're connected and in a position to successfully determine intention and meaning on the part of other people. Unfortunately, synchronous video feeds are not completely synchronous, as many of you have been experiencing, like tonight. So we are extending a great deal of effort, mostly unconsciously, to get in sync with multiple individuals on the screen, with microseconds of delay, and not always a seamless way of communicating. This, combined with the degree of awkwardness and the odd efforting we are using, makes us very tired. And when we're tired, we can't learn very well. So what's the solution? Is we need to, I'm sorry. We need to stop behaving as if these venues were real life, where syncing and synchrony are a natural feature. Instead, we need to exploit the medium for what it's good for. Drama, action, playfulness. These three cornerstones are of what make good ELT pedagogy. These become all the more impactful online on student screens. Rather than treat online venues like a classroom, either treat it as a stage on which you wish your students to perform, or as a way to carry on the kinds of language-focused and meaning-focused conversations you don't usually have time for in your busy live classrooms. In fact, engaging in authentic conversations with individual and small groups of students was highlighted as a huge plus in a study that will be published in October. I'll give you the reference for that at the end. So I began, so some of the online teaching strategies are modeling, amplification, corralling, using linguistic traps, calling attention to syntactic forms and lexis, providing explicit feedback, and providing implicit feedback. And what I'd like to do is to give you concrete examples of each of those. Oops, and implicit feedback, right? So the first one of these strategies was modeling. And if you think back to the original asynchronous highlighting of text in the authentic conversation that the student was not producing correctly, this is a strategy that grew out of that. So when you are communicating with your students asynchronously, and you can also do this synchronously with your voice and other multimodal resources, you have the capacity now, you have the affordance and the strategy to model the kind of language you want the student to use. So the focal language for the next couple of examples is the lexical term sources. And the teacher's language, this is asynchronous again, asynchronous text, or it could be synchronous oral, is she says, you have found a few sources, and she highlights the focal word. In amplification, she does a similar thing. So, which is amplified, you have found a few sources. And there's the audio icon there as well, that if they want to hear that word over and over again, you can plant an audio icon of the word wherever you want, whenever you want, and the student can repeat as many times as they like. This is another form of amplification using multimodal features and the text amplification. You can also saturate. So you have found a few sources. Are these sources useful? Why are these sources useful? Again, trying to highlight the target lexical item while having authentic output along the way. Corralling is getting the student to actually use the target form or the target lexical item. So in this case, the teacher says, tell me about each source. The first, and we all know that trick, fill in the blank, so that the student is corralled into using the word that is being focused on in the particular lesson. Using linguistic traps is similar. We're trying to trap the student into making productive use of the targeted vocabulary word. So the teacher says, where did you find your source? I found my So she traps the student into using the targeted lexical item again. Calling attention to syntax is another strategy that we can use in online fora. So you have found a few sources. Providing explicit feedback. Sources here is a plural noun. Here we just simply do direct teaching. We explain, which is something teachers do an awful lot. I try to discourage them from doing it too much in favor of authentic conversation rather than direct teaching, but sometimes it's expedient. Simply explain. Sources is a plural noun. I'm sure you talented English teachers can think of other ways of doing that as well. Provide implicit feedback. The sources you have found are excellent. Obviously, the student failed to make the correct agreement in number, and the teacher is giving implicit feedback. The sources you have found are excellent. So this is the way I envision online teaching, is that rather than treating online venues like classrooms, that we can either treat these places as stages on which you and your students perform, or as ways to carry out the kinds of language-focused and meaning-focused conversations you don't usually have time for in busy live classes. In fact, engaging in authentic conversations with individual and small groups was highlighted as a huge plus in the study that will be published that I'll mention later on. Teachers found this to be one of the most astounding parts of online teaching, is this idea of authentic conversations, small groups, pairs, individuals, whole group. So I began by pointing out the difference between emergency forced remote teaching, which is what they're telling us we're doing right now. We're being forced into remote teaching, versus what we've been doing for decades now, which is distance education by design. My hope is that with these concepts and strategies, your own design for distance education work can be supported, and the distance between emergency remote practices and thoughtful online teaching practices will be erased. Unfortunately, when we look at this kind of scenario, and this is what they're projecting our live classrooms will start looking like in the United States in the fall anyway, where students and teachers are very, very far apart, and where it's pretty difficult to engage in really good conversation. My hope is that you could consider using the online venue to engage in the kinds of conversations you can't have in these very distant and alienating spaces that they're predicting we're going to be in. I've almost come to the end here for the question and answer, but I'm going to leave you with some research questions that we're considering. So one is, how do language educators' perceptions of online education influence their emergency remote practices? We're going to be interviewing teachers from around the world who were forced into teaching online and see what kinds of perceptions of online education they had prior and how they implemented these and how they impacted their practices in online teaching. Another is how do language educators' pedagogical knowledges get instantiated in the emergency remote teaching? If you're a communicative language teacher in the live classroom and you're forced online, how does that get translated in your work? What are some of the ways you make use of these affordances and extend what you're doing in the online classroom? So let's see, the piece that I mentioned where this piece is coming out in October in Language Learning Technology, where we explore the pre-COVID professional vision of experienced online language teachers. So we interviewed teachers from all over the world who had extensive experience teaching languages online to hear about how they thought of what their craft, what they thought about what it is that they do. So it's sure you'd be interested in that. And also we have, Natasha and Anthony and I have written 2 books about teaching online, one about language teaching and one about generally teaching children. And our publisher, as you can see, there's like 24 hours, you can get 50% off if you use this little discount number. That's at Multilingual Matters. Okay. So pre-COVID, you can see that people got to huddle together to make sense of the screens. We can't do that now, but we still have our voices, we have text, we have audio, we have fantastic digital visuals to use. And my hope is that you'll put these to great and wonderful work to decrease the distance between us and our learners. So I'm very much looking forward to questions and answers. We can go back.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Meskill, for your constructive talk and very inspiring talk on the language teaching. And it's very interesting to know that language teaching, it should be everything, and it should also be fun and engaging for the students. And also thank you for your confirmation that language teaching, we as teachers, English teachers, are orchestrating the authentic and also contextualized language teaching in the conversations. And the research at the end is very interesting. I'm gonna have to look into it. It's about the teaching language online, right? It's about a professional vision of the language teaching. So thank you very much, Professor, for your inspiring talk. And I hope that we learn a lot from your talk as well. So at this time, I think we have a lot of time left for the Q&A session. So if you have any question for Professor Meskill, please click on the raise hand button and our staff will unmute your microphone, okay? So if you have any question, please click on the raise hand button at the right of the screen. Do you have any question? Or if you are not comfortable, you can actually type your question in the chat box and I will raise them, okay? So do you have any questions? Any question from the floor? Okay, so Mr. Allen has questions. So can you please unmute the microphone of Mr. Allen? Thank you. Okay. Hold on a little bit. Hold on a little bit. Okay. I don't know what. Okay, so Mr. Allen, can you please try unmute your microphone, please?
Yes. How's that? Am I going through?
Yes, it's great. We can hear you. So do you have any question for Professor Meskill?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much, Professor Meskill and Chulalongkorn University. This is a very timely topic for discussion. My question for Professor Meskill is about assessment. Professor, what assessment strategies or methods do you recommend for online language teaching? Because right now, I think that's one major challenges for schools, where grades for students is one of the factors being looked at by students and parents as well. So the thing is that there are so many concerns about academic integrity with regard to testing online, right? So probably Professor Meskill can give us recommendations on assessment regarding online language teaching and testing, of course.
Yes, it's one of my favorite topics, as a matter of fact, because I really think that online teaching gives us an opportunity to rethink assessment, because we have at our fingertips a running record of every student's development. We have from day one records of their speech, of their reading, of their writing, of their output, the projects that they do. We have the ability to have transcripts of their interactions with the teacher and with others in the native language, in the target language. So we have to really rethink what to do with all these riches. Instead of thinking in terms of tests, classic tests where students are asked questions to respond to, I think we need to sit back and say, well, no, what can we actually see in the student's language development? I have a transcript here from every day for the last 40 days of this child's development. I must be able to look at that transcript and to see advances or not, see some weak areas that need to be remediated. I can sit down with the student individually and look at their performance, look at all of their materials stored digitally, organized digitally, and look with the student and find those places that need remediation, that need more emphasis, that need more practice. I think it's a way of formative evaluation. It forms the student while their actual learning is in progress, and is a really good window into exactly what the language acquisition process looks like for individual students. So my hope is that we're going to take this as an opportunity to redo tests, look at more portfolio type assessments where we can make use of all this wonderful data that we now have.
Right. So you mean more of formative and authentic assessment instead of standardized testing.
Exactly. Although, when you use formative assessments like this, it's like a teaching tool. So
yes,
even at the end of the school year, if you give a child a standardized test, chances are they're going to do really, really well on that test, because they've had that formative experience of looking at their own learning and finding remediation strategies.
Yeah, I think that's really what we should go for. But the challenge is for classes with so many students. Like, in some classes there could be like 50 students.
Right. Well, another strategy that we have at our fingertips with the digital technology is to have individual students do their own tracking. There's no reason why the teacher has to be responsible for that. So if you have 50 students, each student is responsible for recording, transcribing, analyzing, making recommendations for their the next steps in their learning, and presenting that to the teacher. It's actually an expedient in a way.
Yes, I
Thank you
agree.
very much for your
Yeah.
insight. Yeah, Professor
Thank you
Meskill.
for the question. Yes, we do have a problem here in Thailand as well, especially for high schools. We have like 40 to 50 students per class, and it can be a challenge to teach students in terms of like language, like how we're gonna test them, and sometimes we also have problem like the test at the end of the term is not parallel with what we teach them during the semester. Like sometimes we teach them grammar and we test something else, something like that. So it's like we have to try to, yeah, it's like it's the problem, pending problem. Yeah, we have always have this type of problem. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Allen, for your question.
Thank you too. Thank you very much.
Yes, any other questions from the floor, please? Do you have any other question for Professor Meskill? Okay, while we wait for the questions from the floor, Professor, may I please read the question in the chat box, because there are so many questions here and some of them maybe they cannot use their microphone. Professor, one of the questions asked here is like, it's about online classroom. One of the problem that we have is like cheating in online classroom. Like during the testing process or the examinations, actually we are facing this problem these days, right? Because we are delivering tests online and also we teach online. So Professor, do you have any ideas on this? Like how can we prevent online cheating? Maybe in online classroom or instructions as well, like when we do the activities.
Yeah, I think it's a real good piece of information that can help you maybe change the testing, the system of testing.
Yes.
It's a compelling reason to go to formative evaluation and to put less emphasis on objective tests where students, of course they'll cheat if they're home and they have access to all sorts of information. It's a natural human response. But if the tests are geared more towards what they're doing in their classes, the kind of language trajectories that each of them has established on their own and in consultation with their classmates and consultation with their teacher, if they decide this is my trajectory and these are the strategies that I'm going to use to get there, and here's all the digital data on my performance in my class, those things can be made use of quite powerfully.
Yes. So Professor, do you think that if we change from the actual test like paper and pencil test into the test like performance-based evaluation, would that help? Like, let's say if you want student to speak English or to read text or something, so we can change from like actual test items into like performance, like maybe we ask them to read a text and then like reflect on that text. Would that help the cheating?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It wouldn't just help the cheating, it would help the learning, because that's much more learning oriented than taking an objective test. You don't learn from taking an objective test.
Yes.
But you do learn if you read things out loud and do performance product oriented learning. Look at the students' products as a sign of learning. What they say, what they make, what they write, how they interact with others, their projects. That's the way to assess learning.
I agree, Professor. One big challenge we have here, especially in Thailand, is like the number of students, like Mr. Allen mentioned before. And sometimes it's like we find really a challenge to actually attend to each student individually. Sometimes we really want to like, okay, I will evaluate your speaking and maybe your presentation skill, but we cannot actually attend to each individual because of the time constraint. But I think we can provide solutions on that, because I agree that we need to move toward from the actual test to the performance. So students actually learn to speak and use the language. So thank you, Professor. And Mr. F. Becker, I think he wants to ask you a question. So Mr. F. Becker, can you please unmute yourself? Okay, yes.
This is, I think you can hear me. So is my voice clear?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay. So thank you, Professor Meskill, for wonderful presentations. My question is, so because of this online language teaching saga, this is new for us as well. So don't you think that it is creating more digital divide for the students because of the connectivity issue and access issue as well? For the teachers as well, because they are not trained enough, because it is new. I'm talking about from my perspective. That means I'm from Bangladesh, so with no tech facility. So, so what's your take on it?
Do you have smartphones?
Yes, I have.
Do most people have smartphones?
Yes, I have. And most people nowadays in Bangladesh also have smartphones, but still the internet connection and the kind of facilities we are using, or the kind of online technological tools we are using. So the students are getting it tough to get access to. Say, for example, Zoom we are using nowadays in rural territories. They have smartphones, but still, because of the internet and other sort of things, most of the students cannot get access to. And teachers are not well equipped as well, since it is a new thing for us as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, my recommendation is that you treat your smartphone like a language laboratory, or you treat your smartphone like the best university campus that ever existed, because it's got everything you could possibly need on it. I sympathize with the streaming may be an issue where you are, but certainly if you can get recorded video of different sessions and watch those through your smartphone and use social media sites for your learning management systems. There's certainly workarounds that smartphones can take care of beautifully, where you can do these kinds of very authentic interactions with your students, very tailored, very individualized and community-oriented activities with your students just on a smartphone.
Okay.
And for teachers who aren't really proficient, I would have them play a lot of games on their smartphone and get good. Get good at it.
It seems like many of the teachers here share the similar problems. Like one of the teachers here, Oliver, he also said that like he's teaching in the remote area, so there's no way he can access to like LMS and other like internet-based platforms. So he may have to think the other ways. That's what he said. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
But I think, you know, connectivity is spreading. It's coming to every corner of the earth. And people seem to have a very easy time adapting to it. Not everybody has to go to school to learn to use a smartphone and all of its applications. So I think there's hope.
Thank you.
Okay. Professor, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I think we lost your voice. Okay, so thank you very much, Professor, for the answer, and it's amazing to see like how like young children and maybe young students how they can use smartphone very efficiently these days. Like I can see students like sitting on the SkyTrain and like playing with the phones like very well. Like it's totally different from our age.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So do you have any other question for Professor Meskill? Any other questions? You can actually unmute yourself and ask question. Okay, do you have any other questions from the floor, please? Online teaching. Okay. No more questions. maybe a few more questions because we still have quite some time. We have about 20 minutes. Okay, so if you want to ask questions, it's lucky we have Professor with us here. So this is a chance, everyone. So please ask questions. Any other questions? Yeah, so so I think from the chat panel, we can see that many teachers are sharing the same problem, and basically it's about big classes and how we can manage like LMS platform and online teaching into that class. Like maybe some of them have like 50 students per class and maybe 5,000 students in some subjects. So maybe is it possible, Professor, that one of the participants asked whether it's possible to use like portfolio as an evaluation of any particular class with many students, like exceedingly high number of students? Is that
I think if students are given very specific guidance and instruction on how to form their portfolio, given steps, they're given models, they're given deadlines, they're given structure, and each of those 50 students is responsible for their own tracking of their own learning. And then the teacher's responsibility is just to teach, which makes it quite liberating. When that's all she needs to do. And then at the end of the year, it's the responsibility of each of those 50 students to to provide her with the evidence. Here's how I learned. And it puts a lot more onus, a lot more responsibility on the students, which is where it should be. The teacher can't be doing all the assessing and the teaching when there's that many students in a class.
Yes.
So I would make students responsible for doing that themselves. And it's a great learning experience. It's part of the learning.
Yes, I agree with you. Like we have to move towards our like direct teaching to this kind of like evaluation method, because like in Thailand, for example, like in high school, like we always do the teacher-fronted classroom teaching, like maybe grammar instruction, especially for like very good school, like top school in Thailand. We really teach this way because they have to compete with other students during the university examination. So that's maybe one problem. Like I can see where we are going, but sometimes I'm reflecting on myself. Like I used to teach in that school, and I was thinking like if I taught this way, it might be problematic for the student, as they might think that, okay, they might not be able to compete with others in the examination or something like that. So I think maybe it's like we have to move toward that road, but there's no clear path like how we can move there like smoothly as yet, because we have to find like the one thing that will benefit like every parties, right? But sometimes it seems that we have like, okay, this is good way online teaching, like classroom instructions in portfolio evaluation. We have like this kind of idea, but how to implement it in the actuality may be quite a problem in some settings. So we have to find the best solution for every one of us. So, but it's very eye-opening, Professor, to listen that online language teaching become like a mainstream, and I do agree that we really have to move there. It's like a new trend of teaching, but for me the problem is I'm not sure how we can move there. like and also benefit some of the students. Like in Thailand, for example, in Thailand setting, it's very difficult, quite difficult, because if we focus more on letting the student use the language, like conversations, they may have problem in tests, in examinations. Okay, so thank you, Professor. So do you have any other question for Professor Meskill? Okay, I can see a lot of chat questions, but actually it would be better if you want to talk to Professor directly. So do you have any question? Do you want to ask question of Professor? Any other question? Yes. Okay, Mr. Allen again. Okay, yes. Mr. Allen.
Okay. Maybe my final question for Professor Meskill. Professor Meskill, I'm not sure about online teaching strategies that you presented, I think, correct me if I'm mistaken, the strategies you presented are mainly for conversation or oral language teaching. What teaching strategies would you recommend for classes focused on writing skills? I believe modeling can be used, explicit feedback can also be used. But aside from these, what other what other teaching strategies would you recommend for writing classes?
Well, I personally, when I taught writing, I was, and I still am, a very strong advocate of responsive writing. So if a student is given a writing assignment, it can't be in a bubble. I think that students have to write to an audience, which is what the online medium makes wonderfully convenient. You can find all sorts of audiences for your writing and get genuine, authentic feedback on it. Not just the form, but the meaning itself. So there's the communicative aspect of writing, to me, is very much in line with online instruction, where students are paired up or grouped so that they read one another's work out loud, they critique it, they respond to it, they help one another edit. There's certainly, in terms of mechanics, there's certainly wonderful online guides for students to learn how to be better editors of their work. The OWL site, OWL at Indiana, is a wonderful place. It has just about every tool imaginable to help students edit on a surface level. But certainly, if you want to integrate writing into a communicative format and use these kinds of strategies during the conversations, you train your students to actually use these strategies with one another. During writing as a responsive activity, these kinds of strategies would make excellent tools, I think.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, for your question. Okay, Professor Meskill, I think I better read question from the chat panel. There are so many questions left unanswered. So I think I can see these two questions are really similar to each other. So Professor, do we have any ways, in your opinion, what are some ways we can assist our students to become engaged in online learning, or to become good online language learners? Do you have any suggestions, or what is your opinion on this particular topic?
Now, I think the first and foremost strategy is to build on and value what students already know how to do. Your students are already very highly digitally literate. They know how to use social media. They know how to find information and use it well on the internet. They know how to make videos. They know how to make mashups. They are so talented. So the first job is to value that, recognize it, and integrate those kinds of skills into your activities, your teaching activities. Assume that they know a lot more than you do about how these different apps work.
Yeah, better than me sometimes.
Make them into the teacher, because they really can use these things quite nicely.
Yeah.
And the other part of engagement that I mentioned toward the end is also make it playful, make it fun. There's so much fun to be had both learning languages and being in online fora. It's the place to have fun. That's why we go there, is for pleasures, for enjoyment. So why should online teaching be any different? It should be more fun than the rest of the internet.
Yeah, like what you really emphasize is the first thing that you said was it's the key thing that online learning should be fun, right? English learning should be fun, but most of people tend to hold this opinion that online learning sometimes it can be dragged, sometimes it's not engaging for the students, comparing to what we learn in class, right? When we actually see each other face to face, it's more engaging. But when it becomes online platform, it seems distant. It's like students are far away from their teachers, and sometimes it cannot be engaging. But I think it's like we have to change, really change, right, Professor, change this mindset, because actually we have a lot of things to work online, and we have a lot of activities, and we have a lot of fun materials to learn online that we can actually deliver to the students. But and I experienced myself that it can be fun, like you mentioned, because last semester I did try online, because we have to actually move online like 100%, and I found it like very engaging for the students. I started using videos, and I started using like online like feedback forms and maybe group sessions. I think it can be equally challenging and engaging in terms of like, yeah, there are a lot of things to work.
The high school students here in the United States are complaining bitterly about the online experience, because what they're missing is what they call shared experience. The shared experience that you have in a school, where you're with people and you don't have that lag time and that kind of distance. And my response to that is, you can make online learning shared experience. You have synchronous sessions, you have call out rooms, you have all kinds of activities that involve students in engaged projects that involve and require interaction and assess interaction.
Yes, I do agree. Yeah, I think it can be equally engaging and fun. I'm not sure, but my students seem to love online teaching as well. So let's move on to another question, Professor. I think we have like quite a few questions here. So this one is also interesting. Anyone wants to ask a question for Professor Meskill? You can actually ask right now, or I can read questions in the chat panel. Any questions? Anyone would like to ask questions? No? Okay. Yes. Okay, so Remilin, okay, so she's gone. It's like everyone is like turning off the microphone, so it makes me a little bit confused, like who wants to ask questions. So Remilin, would you like to ask question for Professor?
Yeah.
Okay,
How can we protect our teaching materials once it is uploaded to our LMS? Because we have this experience last semester that one of our co-teachers find her teaching materials in this platform without her knowledge that her materials is uploaded to that particular platform.
Are you familiar with something called Creative Commons?
Yes, I heard it.
Yeah. You go to their website and you can actually put a Creative Commons copyright on your online materials, which says no one should use them without your permission. And people are very good about honoring that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Actually, I want to like share one of my experience with online materials. So here at Chula, we actually did develop our own materials, and it's actually highly copyright, because actually we wrote it like days and nights, and like it's our own copyright. But sometimes like the past semester, we actually have to deliver the file online to the students, and we are afraid that it might be used like in the wrong way, like illegally. They might share the file with other students like that. So if you are afraid of the copyright issues, actually there is the way you can do it. I have tried, I have never tried before, but I think I will try it next semester, is that there is a way for you to, like when you create a file, online files, you can actually enter a website, you can Google it, and there is actually a way you can make it expire on your set date. Like let's say at the end of this semester, the file will delete itself. Okay, so actually if you want the student to use only one semester, you can actually set the expiry date. Like, okay, after October 31st, the file can no longer be accessed, something like that. You can actually Google it. I think it's like a new way of protecting our privacy, because sometimes we want the student to use the file only during the semester, right? And we don't want them to use it after that for any other purposes. So you can actually, even if they download the file, it can actually kill itself I mean, like it can delete itself in their own computer. So you can just Google it. It's very interesting way. I think I'm gonna do it for my next semester because we take a lot of time to produce our material. So this might be a good way to protect the content of the materials. Okay. So, Professor, we have like quite a few more questions. Maybe we can have like one or two more questions. Okay. One of the question, I think this is asked repeatedly, but one of the person from Indonesia, he would like to know, like, for his students, okay, they actually don't like to do online learning, Professor, in Indonesia. And he didn't understand why that happened, but the students don't like online learning. But he wants to ask you, like, how to do group discussion by using online teaching. Do you have any ways, suggestion, like how to do like efficient group discussion in online teaching instructions and online platforms, Professor?
If you're using an LMS, a learning management system, there should be something called breakout rooms where you can send pairs or groups of students and give them some kind of an assignment. You know, one that comes to mind that just tickled me so much recently, one of my neighbor's children went to something called Magic Camp. Magic? And they're learning to be magicians. So the tea magician would show them a trick, and then they had to go in pairs into the breakout rooms and each figure it out by themselves, and then come back and report on things like that. Are really, really motivating and compelling. If you can come up with tasks that have different outcomes, then you know that each pair or each group is going to come up with something different. And then when you debrief and come back with your experiences, it makes it a very, very enjoyable experience. It's authentic.
Yeah, like make it a task-based, like they have to produce something at the end of the discussion or at the end of the session, right? So they have to make a concrete, maybe one like a product, or maybe a discussion sheet or something that they have to produce so they can work together really well. Because if we don't actually assign them to do anything, just, okay, maybe you can talk for 5 minutes, maybe they are not motivated to do so. So
yeah, but that's not making good use of the medium.
Yeah, I agree, Professor. But Professor, do you have any suggestion, like when we, let's say when we break them into breakout rooms, let's say I have like 30 students, I assign them into 6 groups, group of 5, 6 groups, something like that. And is it like efficient for teachers to actually pop into each group like once in a while to see that progress? Or is it better for professor to wait in the main room and until the breakout session has been completed? So
my experience would be to have the teacher on call.
Okay. Yes.
So if they need her, she's there, and they can knock on her door and she'll help them at any time. I also think that the interaction that goes on during those groups should be recorded. Yeah. Again, going back to assessment, so that there's accountability. Again, students know that they're not just doing busy work, that what they say and what they produce is going to be recorded and part of their learning portfolio.
Yeah, and we as a teacher, we can use it for research purposes, right? Like one of my colleagues is doing. Sure. Yeah, she's working on a research project, and she's always like asked for permission to record students, and she used that information for her own research, like work. I think that's better that's like suitable for us and also the students. They can like produce.
It should be automatic, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Also, I have like maybe a few more questions before we can end the session. Anyone would like to ask question? Actually, I want someone to ask question better than me reading from the chat. Actually, if you have question, you can actually stand up here and ask professor directly. I think you would receive better clarifications. Okay, if you want to ask question, please let me know, right? I'm pending for your question. So one more questions, Professor, is like, this one is like from Robin. Okay, Roblin. So how we will know, if there is authentic language learning through online teaching? Like how will we know, like how we access, like if there is any authentic language learning during the online teaching, like especially for non-native speakers, how can we access the efficiency of our online class, Professor? Like whether the learning actually happens and how efficient was that?
So I'm getting the feeling from the way the question is worded that this is a teacher-fronted classroom and the teacher is assessing her.
I have the same impression. Yeah. So like this is for non-native speakers. Like let's say if we use like adopt the online language teaching, and but because normally we will access them with tests and maybe pre-test or post-test or something like that. But if we move towards the online language teaching, like how can we access their learning, like whether they learn something new in this class or they are recycling their own knowledge. How is there any other ways we can access this, Professor? We can access this, like is there any concrete way we can measure their learning apart from tests? Yeah.
Apart from tests, yes. I think going back to this idea of formative evaluation and formative assessment, having students completely record and document all of their activities so that you can see a learning growth and a learning trajectory. And it's also designing enough activities to generate that kind of performance data. So if you design activities where students don't speak to each other, you're not going to get that data. But if you design activities where students have to contact native speakers and interview them, or do a performance and interview the audience afterwards, or write a script and have people critique it, any kind of activity that you can record and have a product of, there's your evidence of learning in those products and in the process.
Yes, and we can assess the learning from there. It's like very concrete, right, Professor? Because we actually have documents for evaluation. Thank you very much, Professor, and also of the question. One last question, actually it's not a question, actually it's like a request from our audience. Professor, one of the participants is very interested in your article that you share at the end of your presentation. So he would like to know whether you can actually give like a brief overview of what your research results were.
Sure.
Yeah. So this will be the last one. Okay, we still have 5 minutes. Thank you, Professor. Actually, I'm really interested in it also, as well, because I'm working on the research online, yeah, as well. So.
Right. So we interviewed, as I said, teachers from all over the world who were experienced online educators, and we asked them about their professional vision, how they thought about this practice, this craft of teaching online. And it was really interesting. I can kind of go backwards in my head. I don't have the data right in front of me, but surprisingly, none of these teachers was technocentric. You would think that an early adopter, somebody who said, oh, I'm going to teach online because I love computers or I love technology. And that wasn't the case at all. There was no one who was what we call a geek, a technology lover. These people uniformly loved pedagogy and they loved their students. And they saw this as a wonderful marriage where all the things they didn't like about the live classroom, where things go by way too quickly, you can't archive them, you can't have evidence of learning because it goes by and it's gone. You can't have individual personal relationships with students because there's no time. You can't do individual tailored instruction or tailored assessment or tailored remediation because there's no time. These were all observations they had about online learning that made them absolutely fans of it. Great fans of what they did. Let me see what else I can remember. How they learned to be online teachers was very interesting as well. Only a couple of them. This was, I think we did, I can't remember exactly how many we ended up surveying. It was a couple hundred. Very few were able to learn how to teach online from their university or their school ITS centers, their instructional technology centers, because language learning is so unique from other kinds of learning. And most ITS centers, they teach people how to teach math and science and biology and things that have a lot of those standardized tests. And so our language, these people that we interviewed looked at that and they said, wait a minute, that's not what the medium is good for. The medium is good for interaction. And that's how they taught themselves mostly, by analogies with social media practices, by reading, by going to conferences, by talking to colleagues. They became self-taught online professionals and discovered the joy of these affordances in their work. So yeah, those are the main findings. And I'm sorry, I don't have it right here, but there are classifications of these kinds, or I'd say not classifications, clusters of these kinds of dispositions that came out as well that are interesting to look at. So that's coming out soon.
Thank you, Professor. I think we look forward to this article, and actually I'm trying to Google it, but it's not.
No, it doesn't come out until October 2020.
Yes, but so we will look forward to reading your article, and very interesting topic, Professor. Thank you very much for sharing the brief research result with us, and thank you for the questions to Mr. Raphael. So I think it's time to complete this session because we're running out of time, and today it's a good thing that we have a long time for the Q&A session, and we learn very constructive ideas from Professor Meskill, and I can not thank you enough, Professor. I think it's very beneficial for all of us, the teachers that are trying to move towards online teaching, which is the coming trend for our English language teaching as well. And I really love the vibe of United States classroom English teaching. I used to teach in that situation, and I love how the students are really engaging, even though they are not online students. Actually, at that time, online teaching was really newly introduced. So I think we can move toward the US classroom settings. Is that an idle classroom or what? But they're really engaging students. And thank you very much, Professor and everyone. So before we really complete this session, I'd like to say thank you very much for joining the session today.